Ladies and gentlemen, I have had an epiphany. It came to me while I was binge playing Destroyers. You see, I haven't grinded to the end of the Royal Navy line. I just haven't. For some reason, I stopped at tier, I don't know, like tier 6 or... yeah, tier 6, because I was on the Lightning, and I just decided to finish it because, well, you know, I've really got no more lines to grind, so... it's just that one. I think I'm lacking the tree split on the Russian destroyers as well, and I haven't been playing destroyers that much in general just because of, well, I don't think I really need to go into that. I think we all know the issue right now and why players aren't playing destroyers, but I wanted to see what it was like. I wanted to see what it was like playing destroyers for a long time, so I got in there and I grinded through the Lightning, and I'm about halfway done through the Jutland right now, and I would say a good 80% of my rounds have been against CVs, and I have excelled. I've done good. I'm not going to lie. I feel like I've done a decent job in games with CVs. So while I understand that there's a lot of hate and anger in DD players towards CVs right now, I personally wasn't quite feeling it. And maybe I've just been playing long enough that I know how to deal with it, and I know how to counter them. And I'll be honest, there were some instances in which there were no counters whatsoever, and I really have grown a distaste for rockets more than even Midway dive bombers. Which, by the way, if you haven't played the playtest, you need to try it because Midway is getting nerfed. Big time. Midway is getting a huge nerf, and its HE bombs are really not going to be that effective against destroyers anymore. So that's good news for you destroyer players out there. Tweaks are continuing to happen. But no, as I was grinding these two ships or through them, I had a lot of fun, and it rekindled my love of the destroyers, in spite of the fact that there were CVs in the majority of the rounds and I had to deal with them. I dealt with it. It still got me thinking, and this leads me to my epiphany. Players have been trying to figure out how to best help destroyers in this heavy CV meta. What can we do for destroyers? And I know things have been thrown around like give destroyers defensive fire and yada yada yada. Well, I think I have the solution if things don't get better. And it's so simple. I don't know why I didn't think of this before or suggest it before. Destroyers don't need the defensive fire consumable. What they need, what destroyers need, is the fighter consumable. Give destroyers the fighter consumable. Don't give it to the carriers. Give it to the destroyers. That would be the best counter for destroyers. It would counter CVs in such a way that destroyers would be able to cap once again. They wouldn't be scared. They'd go to the cap, and once they get to the cap, they can pop smoke or they can put that fighter consumable in the air, and you know it'll last 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. And if an aircraft carrier really decides to loiter around long enough, yeah, sure, the fighters will go away and it can go on to attack the destroyer that's on the cap. But if it does that, it's giving up the potential to help its team and deal damage in other ways against battleships and cruisers and everything else. Really, I thought long and hard about this and this whole CV-DD interaction situation going on right now, and all the issues therein. And there are issues, I'll be honest. There are a lot of issues. I don't think anyone denies that whatsoever. And even after several months, we're 3-4 months into the carrier rework, and destroyers, a lot of destroyer players are still having big issues. And that's not surprising, because there are a lot of good carrier players out there, and there's a lot of not even good carrier players out there. There's a lot of average carrier players out there that have tools at their disposal that destroyers can't mitigate. Really, I think rockets are worse than HE bombs, and that's my opinion. I mean, I know that they made it harder to use rockets, but it really doesn't seem like it from a destroyer's perspective. I mean, there's still a shotgun blast to the face, and it's rough, especially if you got two carriers in a round. Honestly, I think I've less enjoyed the mid-tier rounds than the high-tier rounds, because you're more likely to get two carriers in the mid-tier rounds. And if you have two carriers in the mid-tier rounds using rockets against you and they both decide to go after you and you're a destroyer, your life is pure misery. At least now, tier 10 aircraft carriers, you don't see two carriers anymore. I think they got rid of that completely, or at least they said it's less likely to happen, and I haven't seen it happen in my grinding of these destroyers in the past week. So that's a good thing. But still, I think destroyers are going to continue to need help. And in my opinion, the best way to give them that help is to give them the fighter consumable. And it makes sense. It's not like it's weird giving fighter planes to a destroyer. I mean, who's to say that the captain of the destroyer can't ring it into an aircraft carrier or an air base on land and say, hey, look, I need a fighter escort. Give me a squadron over top of me. I mean, there you have it. I'm sure it happened historically at some point, somewhere. So you can't argue that it's not realistic. I think it makes total sense. So instead of having the aircraft carriers have the fighter consumable, take it away from the aircraft carriers. They don't need it. It's less effective for them because it takes away from what the aircraft carriers are trying to do. And let's face it, aircraft carriers can't always get out there to support your destroyers. They just can't. So they can't drop that fighter consumable in a place that it needs to go without breaking away from their mission. So give it to the destroyers. Give the fighter consumable to the destroyer so that as they're capping or doing whatever they need to do, they can pop that and have some form of safety for a short amount of time against rockets, against bombs, against anything. That's my opinion. That's what I think. But I want to know what you think also. And again, I know carriers are a very, very polarizing thing right now. And I'm just looking for solutions to make it a more enjoyable experience for destroyers, which right now, let's face it, they're the ones that I think were hurt the most by this. And I will say that I still see a lot of them. It's not like the population of destroyers is declining. I think it did for a little while, but it looks like it's coming back. I mean, a lot of the rounds I'm playing in, there's tons of destroyers. And it's a lot of fun, even being a destroyer. I mean, I've had a lot of fun in DD versus DD battles, with or without aircraft carriers. So destroyers are still there, and players are learning to deal with the CVs the best they can. But it is hard, and I think that adding the fighter consumable to destroyers would go a long way to helping them. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that's a good idea? Would you take fighter consumables away from carriers, and would you give them to destroyers instead? Or do you have another idea, which doesn't involve removing carriers, because we all know that's not going to happen. Too much work was invested in this. But I want to know your thoughts. Put them in the comments, and I will talk to you all later. Zoop out!